What if Canada's economy collapsed tomorrow? Which cities would stumble first, and why are millions of families more vulnerable than they realize? The truth is, not all Canadian cities are built the same. Some are dangerously fragile, with sky-high housing markets, mountains of debt, and unstable industries holding them together. In this video, we'll count down the top 10 cities most at risk, revealing the places that could be hit hardest in a crash. Stay tuned, because number 1 might shock you, and it could even be the city you're living in right now. Number 10, Winnipeg. When talking about vulnerable Canadian cities during a potential economic crash, Winnipeg often surprises people by appearing on the list. At first glance, this city is known for its rich history, cultural diversity, and central location in the country. However, beneath the surface lies a fragile foundation that makes it especially at risk. Winnipeg has long faced challenges with poverty rates, aging infrastructure, and a slower pace of economic growth compared to other metropolitan areas. This means that if the national economy takes a downturn, Winnipeg would have fewer tools to cushion the blow. Families already living on thin margins could be pushed into financial distress, and struggling neighborhoods could see conditions worsen quickly. For many residents, the dream of stability could vanish almost overnight. Another major weakness lies in the city's job market. While Winnipeg has some diversity in industries like manufacturing, transportation, and government services, it has not kept up with faster-growing hubs such as Toronto or Vancouver. Unemployment pressures tend to rise here faster when the national economy slows, leaving thousands vulnerable to layoffs. Add to this the city's relatively high crime rates and ongoing issues with urban poverty, and it becomes clear that Winnipeg lacks resilience. A crash would likely deepen inequality, leading to more families turning to social support systems that are already stretched thin. The housing market also poses risks. While not as inflated as Vancouver or Toronto, many households carry high debt levels, and even a moderate wave of foreclosures could trigger panic. For everyday residents, the effects of a crash would be both immediate and visible. Small businesses could close their doors as consumer spending collapses, while already underfunded public services might struggle to meet growing demand. Imagine neighborhoods where boarded-up shops line the streets and essential programs like healthcare or housing assistance face severe strain. The sense of community stability, something Winnipeg is deeply proud of, could be shaken. While not the flashiest city in Canada, its combination of economic fragility, social struggles, and limited growth opportunities puts Winnipeg in the uncomfortable position of being one of the first cities that could stumble if Canada's wider economy collapses. Number 9. Halifax. Halifax, the largest city in Atlantic Canada, is often celebrated for its coastal beauty, historic charm, and reputation as a welcoming hub for students, military families, and newcomers. Yet behind its appealing image, Halifax carries serious vulnerabilities that could make it one of the first cities to stumble if Canada's economy crashes. The city has experienced a sharp rise in housing costs over the past decade, far outpacing local income growth. Families who once found Halifax affordable are now facing mounting debt, and many households rely heavily on credit just to maintain their standard of living. This imbalance creates a fragile environment where even a mild economic shock could lead to widespread financial strain. Another major factor lies in Halifax's economic structure. While it has strengths in education, tourism, and government employment, it lacks the level of industrial diversity seen in larger Canadian cities. A downturn in tourism, for instance, could send ripple effects across restaurants, hotels, and retail stores. Similarly, government cutbacks or university funding pressures would have a direct impact on the city's stability, given how heavily it depends on these sectors. Add to that the city's limited wage growth and a growing reliance on the service economy, and Halifax's ability to withstand national or global recessions becomes questionable. When jobs tied to seasonal or service-based industries vanish, families often have few alternatives to fall back on. If the economy were to collapse, the consequences in Halifax would be especially visible in the daily lives of its residents. Imagine the impact of rising unemployment combined with skyrocketing rents in a city where affordable housing is already scarce. Young professionals and students could be forced to relocate, draining the city of talent. Meanwhile, small local businesses, many of which operate on thin margins, could face closures at alarming rates. The sense of security and growth that has defined Halifax in recent years could erode quickly, replaced by economic anxiety and rising social pressures. For a city often viewed as a safe and pleasant place to live, Halifax stands at number 9 on this list because its underlying weaknesses could turn devastating during a full-scale Canadian economic crash. Number 8, London, Ontario. London, Ontario, often referred to as the Forest City, is known for its leafy neighborhoods, universities, and growing population. But beneath its image as a mid-sized Canadian hub, London carries serious economic vulnerabilities that could make it one of the hardest-hit cities if Canada's economy crashes. For decades, the city's backbone was its manufacturing sector, but globalization and shifting markets have left many of those jobs unstable or disappearing altogether. While London has tried to reinvent itself with education and healthcare industries, it still struggles with slower job creation compared to larger urban centers. This leaves many families with limited employment opportunities, and in a downturn, that fragility would be exposed. One of the most pressing risks is the household debt problem in London. With relatively lower wages and a rising cost of living, many residents rely heavily on loans, credit, or mortgages to stay afloat. The local housing market has also surged in recent years, as people from Toronto and surrounding regions moved in seeking affordability. But this influx has pushed home prices and rents far beyond what many London residents can realistically handle. If a national crash sends housing values plunging, homeowners here could face negative equity, while renters could still be left struggling with high costs and fewer jobs. This dangerous combination makes London especially vulnerable to a spiral of foreclosures, evictions, and financial instability. On the streets, the impact of a collapse would be hard to miss. Small businesses, already strained by rising expenses, could shutter at alarming rates, leaving empty storefronts across once busy districts. Students and young families, who make up a large share of the population, might abandon the city altogether in search of work, draining London of both talent and vitality. Public services, from healthcare to education, could face pressure as tax revenues fall while demand rises. The sense of being a growing, vibrant city could quickly be replaced with one of decline and uncertainty. Ranked at number 8, London highlights how a mix of manufacturing decline, debt dependence, and overheated housing could cause the city to falter early in the event of a Canadian economic crash. Number 7, Calgary. Calgary, often called the energy capital of Canada, is a city built on the strength of the oil and gas industry. For decades, it has enjoyed prosperity whenever global oil prices were high, fueling rapid growth, luxury developments, and rising wages. But this heavy reliance on a single sector makes Calgary especially vulnerable if Canada's economy crashes. When oil prices dip or global demand weakens, the effects ripple across the city: job losses, stalled projects, and shrinking corporate investments. A national downturn combined with instability in global energy markets could leave Calgary exposed in a way few other cities would experience. Residents who once enjoyed financial security could suddenly find themselves in precarious situations. Another challenge lies in Calgary's housing market. Like many Canadian cities, home prices surged during the past decade, driven by population growth and periods of high-paying energy jobs. But when the industry slows, many workers are left with mortgages they can no longer afford. Already, Calgary has faced cycles of boom and bust in its real estate sector, with neighborhoods swinging between prosperity and foreclosure signs. If the wider Canadian economy enters a crisis, Calgary's housing market could spiral downward quickly, leaving families trapped in negative equity and landlords unable to cover costs. This vulnerability is compounded by the fact that the city has fewer economic anchors outside of energy, making diversification a challenge during tough times. On a community level, the social consequences of an economic crash would be severe. Small businesses, which often depend on the disposable income of energy sector workers, could close in large numbers. Unemployment lines could grow longer, and families who once thrived on oil-driven wages might struggle to meet even basic expenses. The city's ambitious infrastructure projects could stall, leaving half-finished developments as reminders of better times. Calgary's spirit of innovation and resilience is undeniable, but when tied so closely to one volatile industry, that resilience has limits. Ranked at number 7, Calgary demonstrates how dependence on oil and gas, combined with a fragile housing sector, could make it one of the first major Canadian cities to fall if the national economy collapses. Number 6, Victoria. Victoria, the picturesque capital of British Columbia, is often admired for its coastal beauty, tourism appeal, and reputation as one of Canada's most desirable places to retire. Yet beneath the postcard-perfect scenery, Victoria faces significant economic vulnerabilities that could turn dangerous if Canada's economy crashes. One of the biggest issues is its sky-high housing market, which ranks among the most expensive in the country relative to local wages. Many residents already struggle with affordability, and a large number of households carry substantial mortgage debt. If the national economy falters, Victoria's housing sector could collapse faster than most, leaving families and retirees facing losses they cannot recover from. Another factor that makes Victoria fragile is its reliance on a relatively narrow economic base. The city depends heavily on tourism, government employment, and retirement income. During stable times, these sectors can sustain steady growth, but in a downturn they quickly show cracks. Tourism is highly sensitive to recessions, as fewer people travel when money is tight. Government budgets can also be reduced, leaving public workers facing cuts or wage freezes. Meanwhile, retirees dependent on investments or pensions would see their financial security shaken, reducing their ability to spend locally. This limited diversification means that even a moderate national crash could send shockwaves throughout Victoria's economy. The impact on daily life would be severe. Local businesses, from cafes to boutique shops, rely on a steady stream of tourists and retirees with disposable income. If that flow slows, many could shutter, leaving streets filled with vacancies. Younger workers, already priced out of the housing market, could abandon the city in search of better opportunities, while older residents might find their savings no longer cover rising costs. The sense of idyllic stability that draws people to Victoria could be replaced by visible inequality and declining services. Ranked at number 6, Victoria highlights how a mix of unaffordable housing, economic dependence on tourism and government, and a limited job market could quickly unravel if Canada faces a major economic downturn. Number 5, Ottawa. Ottawa, Canada's capital city, is often seen as one of the most stable places to live thanks to its strong connection to government employment and public administration. On the surface, this seems like a safety net against economic downturns, but the very dependence on federal jobs is also what makes Ottawa vulnerable if the country's economy crashes. A significant slowdown could trigger budget cuts, hiring freezes, or wage reductions in the public sector, which employs a huge share of the city's population. When a majority of households rely on one employer, in this case, the federal government, the risk of widespread financial strain becomes magnified. Another pressing concern is Ottawa's housing market, which has grown increasingly overheated in recent years. While not as extreme as Vancouver or Toronto, housing costs in Ottawa have surged well beyond the reach of many middle-class families. Paired with rising household debt and stagnant wage growth outside the public sector, the city's financial stability looks shaky. If the economy takes a hit, mortgage defaults, declining property values, and reduced consumer confidence could strike hard. Ottawa also faces challenges from its limited private sector growth. Although tech companies have a presence in the region, they do not generate enough jobs to balance the dominance of government employment. This lack of diversification makes Ottawa less resilient compared to other metropolitan areas. For residents, the daily effects of a crash would be visible across multiple fronts. Local businesses that depend on the steady spending of government employees could see revenues shrink almost overnight. Families relying on secure public sector jobs could be shocked to find themselves facing layoffs or pay cuts. Meanwhile, younger professionals already squeezed by high rents and housing shortages might leave in search of better opportunities elsewhere. Even public services themselves could decline if funding is slashed, leading to longer wait times and reduced quality of life. Ranked at number 5, Ottawa shows how a city's heavy reliance on government employment, combined with rising housing pressures, places it at serious risk of stumbling early if Canada's national economy collapses. Number 4, Edmonton. Edmonton, the capital of Alberta, has long been tied to the ups and downs of the oil and gas industry. Much like its neighbor Calgary, the city's fortunes often rise and fall with global energy prices. In good times, Edmonton benefits from high-paying jobs, booming construction, and a thriving consumer market. But when the economy falters, Edmonton is hit hard, and if Canada's economy crashes, this dependency could place the city among the first to struggle. Thousands of households are directly linked to energy sector employment, meaning layoffs or cutbacks ripple quickly through the entire community. That deep reliance on a single volatile industry is a major reason Edmonton ranks so high on this list. Another challenge is the city's housing market, which has seen cycles of boom and bust for decades. While Edmonton's home prices are lower than Vancouver or Toronto, many families still carry heavy mortgage debt. In a crash scenario, even moderate declines in home values could push countless households into negative equity. Rising household debt levels have already made Edmonton vulnerable, as many families juggle mortgages, car loans, and credit card balances with little financial buffer. If unemployment surges during an economic downturn, those debt loads could become unmanageable, leading to a spike in foreclosures and bankruptcies. Unlike more diversified cities, Edmonton has fewer alternative industries to absorb displaced workers, which amplifies the risks. For everyday residents, the effects of a crash would be visible almost immediately. Small businesses dependent on energy workers' disposable income could shutter in large numbers, leaving behind empty storefronts across the city. Public services and infrastructure projects might be scaled back, worsening pressures on communities already facing strain. Families that once thrived on well-paying energy jobs could suddenly struggle with basic expenses, while younger workers might flee to other provinces in search of stability. The social fabric of the city, already tested during previous downturns, would once again be stretched thin. Ranked at number 4, Edmonton highlights how a mix of oil dependence, rising debt, and limited diversification puts it at serious risk if Canada experiences a full-blown economic collapse. Number 3, Vancouver. Vancouver, one of Canada's most famous cities, is often described as a global destination for its natural beauty, diverse culture, and thriving real estate market. But beneath its world-class image lies one of the most fragile economies in the country. The city's housing bubble is among the most extreme in the world, with home prices far out of reach for most residents. Many families are carrying massive mortgages relative to their income, leaving them dangerously exposed. If Canada's economy crashes, Vancouver would be one of the first cities to feel the shock, as falling home values and surging foreclosures ripple across neighborhoods. For many, the dream of living in Vancouver is already unaffordable. A downturn would only magnify that reality. The city's dependence on real estate investment makes it even more vulnerable. A huge portion of Vancouver's economy has been tied to property development, foreign investment, and the housing market itself. When those pillars shake, jobs in construction, real estate services, and even retail tied to wealthy homeowners begin to disappear. Beyond real estate, Vancouver's job market is dominated by lower-paying service jobs, tourism, and industries that don't provide enough resilience in times of crisis. Add in the fact that the cost of living here, from groceries to rent, is already among the highest in Canada, and it becomes clear why so many households live paycheck to paycheck. A crash could quickly push thousands into financial instability. For residents, the day-to-day fallout would be devastating. Small businesses could collapse as consumer spending plummets, while renters could see rising competition for scarce affordable housing. Families who stretched their budgets to buy homes might face negative equity, while young professionals could be forced to leave entirely in search of more affordable cities. Social inequality, already stark in Vancouver, would deepen as vulnerable communities bear the brunt of the downturn. The city's global reputation as a safe haven for investment and lifestyle would be shaken, replaced by headlines of crisis and collapse. Ranked at number 3, Vancouver stands out as a city whose housing bubble, sky-high living costs, and fragile economy make it a prime candidate to fall early if Canada's national economy crashes. Number 2, Toronto. Toronto, Canada's largest city and financial hub, is often seen as the economic engine of the country. With its bustling skyline, diverse population, and global connections, Toronto appears resilient on the surface. But beneath that strength lies a fragile core, especially when it comes to housing costs, debt, and overcrowding. The city's real estate market is one of the most overheated in North America, with average home prices soaring far beyond the reach of most families. Many households are drowning in mortgage debt, while renters struggle with record-high rents. If Canada's economy crashes, Toronto would be one of the hardest hit, as a housing collapse here would ripple across the entire nation. Another major vulnerability comes from Toronto's reliance on the financial sector, real estate investment, and immigration-driven population growth. While diversity and growth have made the city vibrant, they also put enormous pressure on housing, infrastructure, and job markets. In an economic downturn, the financial sector could face massive layoffs, startups could dry up, and businesses dependent on steady consumer spending might vanish overnight. With so many people already stretched to their limits, even a slight economic shock could result in waves of foreclosures, bankruptcies, and rising homelessness. The city's infrastructure, already struggling to keep up with demand, would face even greater pressure as families turn to public support systems. For everyday Torontonians, the fallout from a crash would be deeply personal. Imagine small businesses shuttering across busy neighborhoods, young professionals unable to cover rent, and families forced to sell homes at a loss. Social inequality, already pronounced, could grow into a crisis as wealthier residents weather the storm while working-class communities suffer. The sense of Toronto as a global powerhouse could be replaced by an image of a city drowning under its own weight. Ranked at number 2, Toronto illustrates how a combination of soaring housing prices, debt dependence, and economic overconcentration makes it dangerously vulnerable if Canada's broader economy collapses. Its sheer size and influence mean that when Toronto falls, the shockwaves will be felt nationwide. Number 1, Montreal. Montreal, Canada's second-largest city, takes the number 1 spot on this list because of its unique mix of economic fragility, infrastructure challenges, and social pressures. Known for its rich culture, historic neighborhoods, and global appeal, Montreal often presents itself as a thriving urban hub. Yet beneath the surface, the city faces deep vulnerabilities that will become apparent if Canada's economy crashes. Montreal already grapples with one of the highest unemployment risks among major Canadian cities, and many families live with tight budgets that leave little room for shocks. Its aging infrastructure and slower pace of wage growth add to the strain, making the city especially exposed in hard times. One of Montreal's biggest vulnerabilities lies in its dependence on traditional industries and limited job diversification compared to Toronto or Vancouver. While sectors like aerospace, education, and technology do contribute, they are not broad enough to shield the city from widespread impacts during a downturn. The city also faces a persistent language barrier issue that complicates employment opportunities for immigrants and newcomers. When combined with already elevated household debt levels, Montreal households could find themselves with fewer job prospects and rising bills. Meanwhile, the housing market, though more affordable than Toronto or Vancouver, is not immune to instability. A sharp drop in property values would hit families who recently entered the market, while renters could face heightened competition for affordable units. On a community level, the impact of an economic collapse would be stark. Small businesses, many of which are family-owned, could close rapidly as consumer spending evaporates. Public services, from transportation to healthcare, might suffer as tax revenues decline while demand grows. Entire neighborhoods that thrive on cultural vibrancy could instead be marked by rising unemployment and financial stress. For a city so proud of its unique identity, the social and emotional toll of widespread economic hardship would be severe. Ranked at number 1, Montreal embodies how a blend of high unemployment risks, aging infrastructure, and limited job diversification could make it the first major Canadian city to stumble if the national economy experiences a full-scale crash. As we've explored, Canada's economic future carries both resilience and risk, and the cities we've counted down reveal just how uneven the impact of a crash could be. From Winnipeg's poverty challenges to Montreal's aging infrastructure, each city has unique vulnerabilities that place it at risk in different ways. Some, like Vancouver and Toronto, face explosive housing bubbles that could collapse under pressure, while others, like Calgary and Edmonton, remain tethered to the volatile oil and gas sector. Even cities that appear stable, such as Ottawa or Victoria, have weak spots tied to government jobs or tourism, leaving them exposed when times turn hard. The purpose of this list is not to create fear, but to provide a clearer picture of the realities facing Canadians if the economy stumbles. Every city carries both strengths and weaknesses, but in times of deep crisis, these weaknesses can become magnified and painfully visible. Understanding which cities might fall first allows families, businesses, and even policymakers to prepare for what lies ahead. Canada's economy is interconnected, meaning that trouble in one region will inevitably affect others. If major urban centers like Toronto or Montreal begin to falter, the consequences will ripple outward, touching communities big and small across the country. Whether you live in a bustling metropolis or a quiet provincial capital, the message is the same: awareness and preparation are key. By staying informed, Canadians can better navigate the uncertain times that may be coming. Which of these cities do you think would struggle the most, and is your city on this list? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. If you found this breakdown valuable, support us with a subscribe. It's just one click, but it fuels the effort we pour into every video. And don't forget to check out our previous upload for even deeper insights.